the skies, firefight calls, the stakes are high. Jonathan Way, heroes and spies, control fire, where strategy lies. Hear the tales, fierce and deep, victors roar, defeated weep. We blaze a way, we don't hold back, control fire, ready to attack.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Controlled Fire, your monthly musings on Mantic's Firefight. I'm Sam.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Luke.
Over the next two episodes, we'll be looking at the newly released alignment protocols, these sweeping rules and balance adjustments for Firefight. This thing is so massive, we're going to need to do it over 2 episodes. There are really that many changes, the biggest thing since command protocols. So next episode, we'll be covering all the changes to faction orders, command orders, and designation keywords, as well as potentially looking at the 2 new scenarios. In this episode, we'll be going through all of the changes to the rules and all of the other adjustments made to factions. Before we jump into that, let's do some From the Forge. Mike, what have you been up to?
I actually haven't been doing much as far as painting and modelling is concerned. As mentioned, I've built my Night Stalkers to work for both Kings of War and Firefight. Last weekend, I went to a Kings of War tournament, which I took my Night Stalkers to. So I had about 5 games practice before that, playing Kings of War, and then had 2 wins and 2 draws and a loss at the tournament. So I was quite happy.
Good result.
Excellent.
So it was good. So it's good. The Night Stalkers working in both game systems.
And you said you had some practice games. What happened in those, Mike?
I lost 4 of them and only won 1 of those against the person who beat me actually at the tournament, which was Luke. Actually, congratulations to Luke.
But bank the win against Luke.
But I will bank the win against Luke. Yes, I will bank that win.
Yeah, congratulations on the win against me, Mike. And that's a great record as well for, you haven't been in Kings of War that much lately. So to come back in and get that kind of record, and a bit of a step up from your records with your Varinger as well. So
yeah, it's generally a step up in my tournament results in general. I'm not that as big a competitive player as the people sitting at the table with me today.
Yeah, it was a scary list. So my hobby lately has been all to do with that, which may come as a surprise because I don't think I've talked about it before, but I painted a bit over half an Orc army in the last few weeks, wondering what's going to happen to Orcs with 4th edition of Kings of War and whether they stay or whether they go. So I've had this, half-done Orc army, and by half-done I mean I've done all the bases and I've painted about a quarter of the models. So I had that half-done Orc army and I thought, I've already qualified for Masters. I don't need to do well. I'm just going to take Orcs because I generally consider them as not particularly great. But it was a bit of a passion project. I love how my army looks and sort of the models that I've got. And the reception has been fantastic to this army, by the way. Everyone really loved it, which was a bit of a surprise, but that was nice. So yeah, just painted up those Orcs and took them down to that tournament, Winter's Wrath, with Mike and a crew from Brisbane. We had 6 people travel down the 7 or 8 hour drive down to Port Macquarie to compete in that tournament. I managed to come 3rd. A lot of luck involved in that. The right turn 7s at the right times, except for my 1 loss to Max, who took out the tournament, and I expected to lose to him anyway, so there was no great surprise there. So I was happy with that result. It was good.
So since the last episode, you've painted an army.
Yes.
Good Lord.
And I got 3 votes for best painted as well, so that was nice.
They look fantastic.
Thank
They
you.
really did.
I've been pretty happy with my painting here because I've been able to finish off my Plague Blitzers and my Bruisers and my Wolverine. The Crushers are currently having to share the painting table with some Matsudam, which have started to crowd out their space. But I'm feeling a little bit disappointed in myself. I need to be matching your throughput of painting.
Don't try to do that. Particularly Jason locally likes to make jokes about, so you'll have that army painted up in a week then, because when I knuckle down and do it, I do it.
So we'll jump into our unpacking of all of alignment protocols now. We're going to start by looking at the core rules that have changed, as this will be impacting all factions across Firefight. Luke, would you like to take us through what's changed in the rules?
Sure. So the first core rule change is to do with command orders. The new text is that if they're not pinned at the start of its activation, they can do their order. So it is a change, not a clarification, because those rules only ever existed for faction orders. So a unit using a faction order had to start not pinned. Now it's explicitly also command orders if the commander is pinned at the start of their activation, which obviously Headstrong counts as not pinned if you pass it. So Forge Fathers are all okay. so this doesn't bother them.
I saw that on Facebook, this one got called out recently as a rules query. I like this change because if the first action a commander takes has to be to remove a pin, why even have it as a rule that they aren't able to do their command order if they're pinned? They have to unpin. Why include it as a rule? I like this change because pinning is actually meaningful. It is a way to inhibit commanders. If you're worried about a potentially busted combo, you have counterplay to that combo. But I know, Luke, you feel differently.
I preferred how it was. You still couldn't use it in order to unpin yourself because you couldn't be pinned to do the order.
Mm-hmm.
So, those ones that can unpin still couldn't do that to sort of cheekily get out of it, which is good. I liked that. But it still allowed the leaders to participate in what's going on, which is why you take them. Most leaders, you take them for their orders. And having them shut down completely is quite hindering. It even further increases the power of pinning weapons, which I'm not sure was needed because everyone always takes them because they are almost always great anyway, and it's a indirect buff to pinning weapons to have this change. Not to mention, a bit of a power balance change for factions that don't care so much about pinning, like Forge Fathers. They're pretty much always guaranteed to use their orders, to be able to use their orders because they're pretty much guaranteed to pass their headstrong.
Probably also worth calling out vehicle commanders as well, because of course vehicle commanders can often get hit by anti-tank weapons. So they may be starting their turn pinned with that as well.
Exactly.
I was playing it wrong anyway. So
I'm glad that the universe has aligned to make you right, Mike.
So I played no part in it. But
it's not you that was wrong. The rules that were wrong.
That's right. We'll take it that way, Ryan. So I was playing it for the incorrect version of the rules, but it happens to turn out to be the new version.
But what was your reaction when you found out that you were playing it wrong?
Oh, well, when I first found out that I was playing it wrong, I went, I've been doing myself a disservice because I was able to issue orders and I hadn't been doing it previously. So I guess for me, seeing it this way, or I'm written this way, no, it doesn't really bother me because I spent, 9-10 months playing it wrong. So it didn't really matter to me that much. When at first I kind of went, hit your head on the desk and go, I've been ripping myself off for 10 months.
One unit type, which is also going to be receiving further boosts throughout alignment protocols, but I think is also well worth calling out here, is indirect units. Indirect units, we know, often won't cause much damage. However, they are able to put a pin often on something that they can't see. We might actually start seeing mortar units and other kinds of indirect pinning units being used as counterplay against commanders. So I'm interested to see what happens with this as alignment protocols rolls out.
I feel like that's worse.
Yeah, I got to say, I'm not looking forward to that.
I don't like that.
But it'd be interesting to see them coming across the table, but I don't know if I like the idea of people taking indirect weapons deliberately to pin other people's leaders. I have to play it and see. I don't know if I like that.
I am happy that it will actually be giving indirect weapons a little bit more use, as at the moment there's always been better options you just prefer to take kill, whereas this gives you something else you can do.
So the next we have is specialized units and terrain. This one specifically is saying the anti-grav units may ignore blocking terrain up to the vehicle's height +2 during their move, but may not end their move in blocking terrain. This exists because if you just look at the tables and sort of the rules as they are, it basically says that something like a mule can block, you can use buildings and blocking terrain to block in an anti-grav unit and they can't ever go over it.
Also, looking at the table, there's actually no distinction between anti-grav and tracked vehicles. They actually work identically. And considering the size of some anti-grav vehicles, I'm looking at you, Kira and Chroma, in the Asterian list, which are like 8 inches wide. It's, as you say, it's very easy for them to get boxed in. But this change doesn't make them as maneuverable as flyers. They can't be ending their move in forests or anything like that. They still treat the forest as blocking, but they can boost up and over anything up to generally height 6 and then land on the other side of it. It gives a little bit more maneuverability to these units. They're a bit more maneuverable than tanks, but a bit less maneuverable than flyers, which puts them probably exactly where they should be.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a bit weird before that they couldn't get anything over like height 2 or something like that. It was a bit strange.
Height 2 blocked them before.
Yeah.
They could only cross height 1, which means they could go over obstacles, but if it was a particularly tall cornfield, that skimmer can't go over it.
Forces can jump up the side of buildings in a single line, but a grav tank can only just get over an obstacle.
Since I've done this exact thing with boxing into Jason, this one's for you. Interesting though, while it lets you fly over the terrain, you can't fly over necessarily enemy units.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You ignore blocking terrain,
Yes.
but it doesn't specify you ignore enemy units in the way that a flyer can.
Yeah. So if someone's trying to block you in with their vehicles or whatever, you can't fly over the vehicles. You can just fly over the terrain that they're using to block you in with and come up somewhere else.
100%.
The next rule is steady aim. So we've removed a sentence here, and we removed the sentence which says weapons in a unit with the slow reload keyword do not benefit from steady aim and will shoot as a long action. Effectively, what this says is, should a unit with slow reload choose to steady aim, they will get to ignore a -1.
I'm not quite sure I enjoy this particular change. I don't think steady aim's a long way to get through, able to get through certain things.
Slow reload still forces units with slow reload to want to sit still and shoot. That's the entire point, I think. The rule was to say this unit should really want to sit still and shoot. So something that's not a vehicle with slow reload has to basically not shoot. And then vehicles obviously still get the -1. Making them want to sit still and shoot is the point. But with the introduction of steady aim, it's kind of like further punishing these units because they're not able to apply the reduction of a negative to hit. You look at units that are, shoot 5 slow reload, it's effectively always shoot 6 because with the amount of terrain and, they're not wanting to move, they're wanting to sit still all game. So with the amount of terrain and stuff on the board, they're effectively always hitting on 6s, and that seems too punishing.
I agree. I think it was intended to be a penalty to movement, but it kind of ended up being a penalty to shooting.
Yes.
The next one is my favorite change.
Yes, and it was actually going to originally just be to some units, but it kind of became a core rule change instead. This is exiting a flying transport vehicle, and this is going to be very exciting to a lot of people, I think, who see some of these transport vehicles that they really want to play, and they think, oh, but it's just terrible. And we've called out before that it's
the slowest transports in the game until now.
Exactly. So the wording now says a unit may exit a transport vehicle with the fly keyword if its first activation is an advance or sprint, but it may not assault an enemy unit in the same activation. Simply move the leader model, measuring from the base of the vehicle. This may be done before or after the flying vehicle has activated. So it effectively just becomes exactly like anti-grav units in a flying vehicle used to have before.
Absolutely. I mean, it effectively just means flying transports, you can't assault out of them. But aside from that, they function identically to every other transport.
And there still is a benefit of taking anti-grav units in a transport over non-anti-grav because they don't get obliterated if the transport dies, whereas every other unit still will be destroyed if the flying transport gets killed, which is not that hard to do.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's such a dramatic shake-up for flying transports. I mean, as we said before now, they were arguably the slowest transports in the game, and now they are arguably the fastest. So they're trading their high speed and high capacity for risk. As you say, if you don't have anti-grav and that flyer goes down, you lose the entire unit. Now, because they can't be used for assaults, it means that your flying transports, with their speed, are going to be very well paired with your shotgun-style units, the ones which are able to hop out into close range and unleash close-range fire on the enemy. Or, because with their speed and you're worried about the contents, using them to ride up a lightly contested flank to really make some very swift inroads.
Or you just take something like recruits and that stupid pinning order that they have. Order with selections, blaze away on 7s, fire a manoeuvre.
Drop them on an objective.
Drop them on the objective, blaze away on 7s. Assuming you've got a leader nearby to be able to do it.
I had never even considered putting recruits in there. I had certainly thought about things like veterans or your riot troopers. Bursters, I think, are going to be great inside a Hornet. You can take a full unit of 4 and have them pop out and then shoot their 9-inch toxic pus burst.
And if they die, it's less than 100 points.
That's pretty fun. I will also say, our first ever controlled fire episode was on command protocols. And right near the end of the episode, we said, is there anything that we wish had been done in command protocols? And we were unanimous in that we wish they'd done something with flying transports. We've got wholesale flying transport changes. And paired with some of the other changes we'll be seeing later on in alignment protocols, the flyers have really distinguished themselves as transports in the game. I'm very excited to see how they play.
So there is now a reason to paint my grey plastic Hornet that I've had in a box ever since I bought it. I assembled it and thought, that looks nice, and put it away. Now there's a reason to paint it, and I will.
Brilliant.
So not only are there some rules changes, which is basically, you know, an errata to a change, we've got some rules clarifications, which is more in line with like an FAQ or just fixing up the wording so it's very clear. The first of these is, well, actually kind of straddles a little bit between changes and clarifications, I guess, because this is to line of sight. And we've mentioned it before. The book was never clear because it mentions some different values in some different areas. But now it has been aligned in alignment protocols. So line of sight now says, if either the unit drawing line of sight or the target unit has a height at 4 levels or greater than any other unit or terrain the line crosses, line of sight is clear. So that is, it is very clear now that it is 4 levels difference between terrain and height or what have you to ignore line of sight, as opposed to what we're probably all used to in Kings of War, which is the 3.
I'm very happy just to have this clarified either way. I don't particularly care one way or the other, as long as it's consistent. I guess the big change, of course, is that obstacles can no longer be shot over by vehicles.
Yeah, that was a bit that I always found weird. Like, surely infantry is going to be hiding behind the obstacle from the tank, but they couldn't do it when we were using height 3. We were using height 3 here in Brisbane for clarification. I think 4 makes a lot more sense.
There's also been a clarification to commanders in buildings and vehicles, which is another thing that we've seen crop up a few times on the on the groups. So this says command orders, faction orders, and inspiring can only affect units within the same building/vehicle or the vehicle itself as the commander, while the commander is within a building/vehicle.
There's a couple of clarifications in here. I mean, I know we covered this in our gotchas, quirks, and oft overlooked rules episode. A casual reading of this makes you think that commanders outside buildings or vehicles can't order units in, but that's not the case. And now I think hopefully this clarification makes it very clear this rule pertains only when the commander is in the building or the vehicle. And it also particularly calls out before the vehicle itself, because I think that was something that which might have been assumed, that if a commander's in a vehicle, they can give the order to the vehicle they're in. Now it is explicitly called out.
It's funny because I just assumed that they couldn't. Yeah. Because the vehicle's not within itself.
It's also worth saying that they've applied this same logic to the medic keyword as well. So I know we mentioned before, medic functions kind of similarly to inspiring and to orders. Now, if you have the medic keyword and you're in a building or vehicle, you only apply to units within that building or vehicle as well.
We've also got a clarification to bulky, which basically says that they also can't hit the dirt.
Which is in the hit the dirt section, but is not in the keyword section. Now it is.
And that's been a bit of a gripe with us and some of the, you know, not just Firefight, you know, other rule systems as well, where it's you have to cross-reference multiple rules just to get a full picture of how those rules interact with each other. I'm a big fan of calling out the interactions in both places so that if someone chooses to look up that rule instead of that one, that they get the full picture. So this is great.
Mm-hmm.
We've also got fly keyword, which it hadn't even occurred to me that you could read this in any other way, but it absolutely, rules as written, shouldn't have worked this way. So the fly keyword, we've added shoot or steady aim actions against vehicle with this keyword, get the -1. So before it just said shoot actions, so technically you couldn't ignore that with a steady aim if that was the only negative that you were trying to...
But there wouldn't be a negative. You could you could steady aim and not even take the -1 modifier.
Ignore the cover and not get the -1. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, because if you look at the way hit the dirt and stealthy and all these other ones are phrased, it is shoot or steady aim actions incur a -1 penalty. But fly was different.
Just missed.
I imagine it's just something that was missed when command protocols came through, but missed no longer. So it means that if you steady aim at a flyer, you get to ignore a modifier, which could be fly, but it's still going to have that negative modifier stacking with cover or stealthy. All right, so those are all of the changes to the core rules of the game. Not too many, but I think some of them will be quite impactful. Now we're going to run through all of the changes that have been made to factions. Now, because there's quite a few double ups, so there's been changes to mules, but mules appear in like 4 factions. So rather than going through each faction one by one and calling out all individual changes, we'll do all of that at the end for anything that we don't cover now, but we're going to run through all the broad changes that have happened across all factions first of all. So we're going to start with a theme towards pushing towards larger units. So within this, Asterian marionettes, Marauder commandos and brawlers, and GCPS rangers gain an extra special weapon when they take 8 or more models. The GCPS Marine Lieutenant and the GCPS and Maison Medic each gain Overwhelm. Also worth noting that the Medic has dropped to unit strength 0, so you get no utility for taking only a single Medic. He's not unit strength 1 anymore. And within Veerman, Crawlers and Stalkers gain Horde. All of those are pushing units towards taking larger squads. What's our thoughts on this push?
As much as I'm going to hate facing them, I love Stalkers getting Horde. I think it represents the whole lots and lots of rats, but Jesus, that makes that unit deadly. Then some of the other units getting a chance to get an extra weapon after they have a larger unit, I think that makes sense as well. I guess it could be a hangover from other game systems. I imagine lots and lots of green skins in units and things like that, so it'd be good to see. Not so sure about the old marionettes, etc., but it'd be good to give them an option to take multiple units without having to take the minimum one. I think overall they're good changes.
Yeah, I like the overwhelm on the medic and the marine. I think that's really cool. Yeah, taking a single medic doesn't have unit strength.
You take 5 and then suddenly you do.
The marine lieutenant, for our American friends, given that he can take 10 dudes with him and still have the unit strength 1, which is a bit, naff. So that's great. Yeah, Crawlers and Stalkers, a little bit of a buff for a unit that everyone's probably taken, and forces you more towards taking bigger units of those a little bit instead of just taking minimum size units to unlock a bunch of stuff. Is interesting and good. I'm really excited about the Commandos change, and that is because HMGs, whatever, right? I'm still going to take 1. I'm not spending the points to get more than 1. I want trademark weapons to be able to use the trademark orders, and HMGs, as long as you hit, they've done their job.
Yeah, you can't pin more, as we've said before.
Yes, you can't pin more. But I've always kind of liked the missile launcher that you get on the Commandos, but I've always been a little bit underwhelmed with only having 2 dice, and I've kind of wanted, more, and now I get more. So if I take an 8-man squad of Commandos, I can take 2 missile launchers in there. And that works really well with explosive rounds, because if something goes into a building or terrain, instead of shooting like my anti-tank thing at that unit just to get blast, now I can throw 4 dice of AP2 anti-tank, anti-aircraft at that unit, and I can get blast on those, which is really cool.
I mean, I also like the Horde changes. I mean, I think Crawlers are more likely to have it because you can take 20 strong units of Crawlers. Stalkers, they can only start with 15. So with their initial charge, absolutely they can be getting that +1 to hit, but it really doesn't take many casualties until they lose that combat impetus, which sounds exactly like Veerman in that the more casualties they take, the less effective they become pretty quickly. So I think it's a good thematic change for the Veerman.
Yeah, good and thematic. Not game, it's not a power bump or anything like that. It's just a sort of a nice to have little thing, particularly when you have to charge them with Crawlers and you really don't want to. It's just a little bit better when you do.
Absolutely. I mean, for myself, I'm very excited for the changes to the marionettes. So before there was very little reason to run larger squads of marionettes. I would much rather take a squad of 5 or 6 because that gives me unit strength 2, a thumb, a drop, and an unlock. Right? That's all I need, and I can put a special weapon in there. Because I couldn't ever take more special weapons, there's no real reason to run larger squads. I'm just tossing extra null rifles in, unless I'm planning on doing my no charges and making that my double shot unit, in which case fine. In which I may not even bother with a special weapon in that unit, I might just take the weapon drone instead. But now that you can take 2 special weapons, that opens up a whole lot of more interesting builds. Because suddenly I can go, well, I might take 8, and I can put 2 grenade launchers in there with a marksman drone. And so now I'm actually starting to consider drones where before I would not have. I'm not going to bother buying a stealthy drone for a 6-person marionette squad, but I might for a larger squad.
In future, I would like to actually see Overwhelm for most commander units. Nearly all the commanders have a small unit tags that like to incentivize you to keep that unit small. I would like to see people get an Overwhelm on it to keep the one bigger, because most of them only have, I'm pretty sure nearly all of them do, but a US of 1. And I get that because they'll never lose that US 1 because even if they're down to a single model, they can't lose it. But still, it's good to incentivize people to have larger bodyguard units with their leaders.
The Marauder Warlord with 4 Brawlers is a significantly stronger unit than a unit of 5 Brawlers, but it's only unit strength 1 compared to 2. So even if it's a case of like most of these ones at max strength, at max, buddies with the commander gets the extra unit strength, then that could be cool.
I know someone in one of our chats for the medic made the comment that they are either going to have overwhelm or small unit, because it's small unit 3 and overwhelm 4. So as soon as they drop below having the unit strength, they suddenly become a small unit, which, I don't know, I think feels really nice. That finishes off that. Mike, did you want to take us through the special weapon changes?
Sure. So normal flames have been dropped to 5 points across all factions. So the humble Zippo is made a relatively good price for everybody to be able to take that option in their units. Then you got the Iron Barrage, HMG, Hailstorm, Autocannons, Shadow Barrage, all gaining Blaze Away. I remember we had a discussion where I can't remember if we had discussed it on an episode where the really big gun that actually shoots a lot of Dakarites is not able to blaze away compared to the humble rifle. This didn't really make sense, and I'm glad to see that actually here. Then you got the ion cannons, thermal rifles, commando skyscraper missile launchers, astral beams, all getting targeting systems. So those anti-tank type weapons that you're putting in your infantry squads, no longer have to make that choice between am I going to shoot that tank or am I going to shoot that infantry unit. You can actually split the fire off with those anti-tank weapons, which to me, from a thematic point of view, makes perfect sense for those things to all happen.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always just feels so bad when you have an anti-tank weapon in an infantry squad and you're having to either waste those shots against infantry or you're having to waste all of your light arms fire just so you can target a tank. Now you can actually do both properly.
Yeah, all these changes the flamers are just, people don't really take them, so why not make them cheap enough that they're enticing? But the others, it just makes sense. Just to quote Jeremy from Countercharge, it just makes sense. Those heavy weapons, someone's not going to be shooting at the infantry because that's what their buddies are doing. They're going to be shooting at the tank and vice versa.
Because it's their job.
Exactly.
They've got the thermal rifle.
And they're probably trained in that, trained to do that job. And vice versa. The infantry aren't going to be, pinging bullets harmlessly off a hull of a tank just because their buddy with the thermal cannons doing that. They're going to be shooting at the infantry coming down. So that makes a lot of sense, as well as why is the machine gun sort of, picking his fingernails while the rifles blaze away? He's not. So these are all great.
Excellent.
The next one is buffs to indirect units and mechanized weapon platforms. So the pulse bombard and GCPS and plague mortars gain an extended range to 6 to 36 inches now instead of the 24 that they had. The GCPS mortars also drop in cost to only plus 10 points.
Over the autocannon.
The Gungnir drops to 120 points, which is great, gaining heavy armor and also dropping to 36 range on the Seeker missiles.
Which is the anti-air version.
Yes, which is fair enough. That just brings it in line with other sort of missile launcher style units. The Onager and Mortar Mule drop to 105 points, which is a great bargain. They do lose 1 hit point in the process. Marauder Gun Track reduces to 3 hit points and loses slow reload. And they also get the option of a second model along with the Rumbler in BMN.
We've spoken before about indirect weapons feeling a bit unloved. So, here we're seeing some range increases. I don't think I've taken a pulse bombard in Asterians since this version of Firefight. They used to be a little bit overpowered before. But now, you're looking at, a 36-inch range and the chance to pin something I can't see. I might look at it now. I'm obviously very excited that the Mortar Mule has come down in price. It was never really outputting enough to justify it, but now I think it has a place. I know in some of our chats, people have also been talking about for the Onager as well, does it always need to be a Wolverine? Maybe this gives us another option in our support slots now.
For me, particularly, I like the gun track and the rumblers getting the option for a second model. It always sucked to take those kinds of units in the support slot. Now they can actually get the firepower to do something, and particularly with the gun track losing slow reload, as we discussed, the slow reload steady aim interaction now makes them a much more enticing unit. Hitting on fives, like I said, and never being able to ignore cover just hurt way too much the couple of times I ran one. Annoying to go down to 3 hit points, I guess, on the gun track. Maybe 4 would have been fine for them. The Rumbler becomes a much more enticing choice now once we get to the changes to Veerman that we'll discuss, because there's a bit of dirty done on the tunnels. So maybe a couple of rumblers is actually an option. I've run one rumbler before, and it wasn't as atrocious as you would expect it to be. It was, it was bad still, but now with 2, maybe not so bad.
Everything counts in large amounts.
That's the one.
Gungear dropping, from memory, 35 points and gaining heavy armor certainly makes it an enticing option at the moment, and something. I do have the tops. I've never painted them, so I have them, so I can be able to put them on my chassis of my vehicles. So that there's something that's on the card, so I can paint them and test them out.
Yeah, I think it gives a viable long range firepower piece to the Forge Fathers.
Well, considering they're losing some of their other options.
All right, Mike, do you want to take us through the next one?
Nerfs to missile launchers.
It's my present to you, Mike. Go ahead.
Oh, I wish it was a bigger birthday present. Thank you very much for the...
God, is he like this at Christmas?
Far humbug. Well, as I said, so GCPS weapons teams and GCPS Maison and TACs are all paying more for their missile launcher upgrades. Marauder weapons teams now use the standard missile launcher profile, and all missile launchers except for the handheld versions are dropping to AP1, but gain seismic. I know Sam and I have a different point of view on this. I'm not sure. I know I've been harping on the fact that I want to see missile launchers to be not as good as they were previously, and that sort of has happened. I was personally hoping that there would not be such one unit takes all. Particularly with GCPS, you have your autocannon, you have the missile launcher, and then you have the las cannon. I can see where and
the mortar now only costs 10 points.
So now you have the mortar, so the mortar in there, but at least now I can see the use for the autocannon potentially, if that's what you want to do it for. I think that's made it a little bit better with this change. A missile launcher is probably a little bit more useful over a las cannon. So I'm not sure if it went far enough in that direction, but we'll see. Happy for the community for the next 12 months to prove me wrong.
And the reason for that is because I guess something like a vehicle, the seismic makes up for the loss of AP because it's still AP2, but the seismic also helps reduce the heavy armor roll down by 1 as well. So it is slightly better against vehicles.
Heavy armor vehicles
now than it was, and it's the same against vehicles and constructs, essentially, as it was that don't have heavy armor, and it's worse against everything else.
Yeah.
So it happens to be better against Forge Fathers, which I'm to not take personally, and if someone on the RC raised their middle finger at me, complaining about missile launchers for a year.
But not the troops. It's not better against the troops because it helps with
the seismic still goes through the heavy armor, right? So.
It still helps with the heavy armor, but it doesn't help with the AP. So it's kind of a balance.
Yeah, they'll be only just as good against Forge Fathers, Mike.
It is still better against Forge Fathers than it was.
I think it is also the points increase on them as well. It starts making the cost of missile launchers pretty significant compared to the other options. I think they're now plus 20 points on say the base autocannon, which if you're just looking to kill infantry, I don't know if you'd bother. Obviously, you can be buying the las cannon in order to take out vehicles. You can take out the mortars in order to pin commanders now. Previously, you just look at the missile launcher because it kills everything pretty well. Now, it's not going to do the same against infantry. It'll certainly do the same against flyers, and it's about the same against vehicles. But you're having to pay a bit more, and it's worse against infantry.
And don't forget as well, not only do they go up in points and down the AP, the Marauder ones also gain slow reload, which, as we just discussed, if you can sit still, it's not as damaging as not having slow reload at all. Mm-hmm. But I frequently would move my Marauder weapons teams before shooting. Like I would move them around, and now that's a lot harder to do.
Absolutely. Also worth calling out the standardization of the Marauder heavy weapons teams. Before they were 4D Blast D2. Now they are 2D Blast D4. So they are now the same as GCPS, Maison, the standard missile launcher profile. If you run the numbers on it, it is a slight debuff to the Marauder weapons teams as well. 4D Blast D2 does work out better than 2D Blast D4. So they have been brought back in line with other factions.
Yes, it is a debuff. I did like them how they were.
Another kind of missile launcher has made its way onto the field, and this is one which has been asked for a bit. Striders and stunt bots now gain the shoulder rocket options that they get in Dead Zone. So in Dead Zone, you can buy shoulder rockets. It's on the models. They haven't been represented in Firefight, but now for 5 points, you can buy a one-shot, range 18, 2D, AP1, blast D4 weapon. No anti-air, so it's not exactly the same as missile launchers. It just has the same damage dealing profile, minus the seismic. But for 5 points, you get a one-shot weapon off your Strider. What do you think?
Interesting, I think. It's interesting. I'm trying to decide whether I would take one or not, but it's an option. Why not?
That tells me it's pointed about right if you're pondering whether you take one or not.
Well, I know we had this discussion earlier. I don't even know if I would take a Strider in the first place, and then I've got to decide whether I'm going to be putting on something like marksman or rocket launchers on top of that, and it becomes quite expensive if you're putting all those options on. So that's kind of what I'm running through in my head.
Yeah, fair, because you take a Strider as a budget option for other versions in support.
Yes.
I think particularly in Marauders, not only is basically everything in the list in increments of 5 points, which is nice and neat, because I tend to do things like, if I take a unit of Brawlers, I default to like 3 claws, right? This gives the option to like, if I've got 5 points left, I'll just add claws to another model. Now maybe I'll do something like this instead. Targeting systems would be nice on the shoulder rockets just to throw some wounds somewhere else, but it's an anti-infantry style missile. Probably if I'm taking a stunt bot, I'm generally taking an anti-tank stunt bot. You're not really going to sneak many wounds through on a tank with this missile from the shoulder, so it's probably not really worth it. If I was taking like an the flamer style stunt bot or something like that, then I'd definitely consider it. Can
I say then it might actually be a buff to the style of Strider we tend to see less? Because we were talking before, we tend not to see burst laser Striders, maybe not so many urban assault Striders, whereas this fits in very nicely into that playstyle.
We do locally in Australia see a few people playing the Big Claw and Flamer stunt bot, so they see play, and I think this is a really good addition to have there, just to throw the extra couple of wounds on the Flamer version when you shoot something one time. But or shoot from at range, add a few longer range shots before you close. That's another great idea as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I'm thinking, if I've got to spare 5 points, why not? Will it likely kill more than 5 points of enemy? Maybe. In that case, great. And if I have to leave it at home because I can't fit it in, it's really not the end of the world. So I like it as an option.
It'd be hard not to kill a zombie unless you're putting it against a plague zombie or a scarecrow or something. You're pretty much going to kill something more than 5 points worth, I suppose.
Yeah.
The next group we have is transports, and this one's interesting because we get a bunch moving to auxiliary now instead of being a specialist. So GCPS, Marauder, and Plague Wolverine APCs now move to troops and get the auxiliary keyword. So they don't unlock, but they don't need to be unlocked, which is one of the major detractors for taking these units. At Maison Labs, the enclosed mule moves to troops with the auxiliary keyword, and they also gain some weapon options.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's been a really hard call to fit these in before. I mean, I know we were talking about the Wolverine APC. Can we see use for it in Plague during our Plague review? And yes, but in a specialist slot, it's hard. Well, now it's a troop auxiliary. So it feels a lot more like the Drakkar, the Kira, a capacity 10 auxiliary transport sitting in troops. I really like it. It also gives some great competition to the mule, considering what we're about to see for the mule.
Oh, how I love the mule. Well, look, I'm going to take it as a small win. The mules have now dropped in speed from 12-15. I don't think they need to be hit with a Nerf bat. I think they need to be hit with a baseball bat. I still think it is the most broken unit in the game. Let's face it, if something was going to assault out of a mule, they're going to move 12 anyway. More than likely, a 6-person unit is going to be an assault unit rather than a shooting one. So I don't see this as going to be a major impact overall. Could do, but I doubt it. I think probably the only thing that's going to really affect seeing mules potentially less is the Wolverine APC being moved into auxiliary and troops. I think it may have a larger impact than the speed 12-15 ever will. Yeah, compared to a GCPS weapons team with an autocannon, it's just 15 points more, and it comes with a whole raft of extra bonuses.
The main thing I'm interested by, with the mule being 12-15 and the Wolverine being 6-12, and the Hornet being 12-18, you've got some really interesting choices now when it comes to selecting your transport, because there's really not too much of a difference between the mule, advance, and sprint. It's still advances 12, so you can come out and assault. It hasn't changed at all as an assault vehicle. But before it would move 18 to drop, say, a shotgun style unit, now it's only 15. But compared to the Wolverine, you've dropped 4 capacity for that extra 3 inches of sprint. Is that worth doing? Probably often not. Which actually means that for your drive up, drop and shoot, the Wolverine being able to do it with 10 at 12 inches is often going to be better than the Mule doing it with 6 at 15 inches, I think. And compared to the Hornet, which can fly a full 18, drop and then have the unit shoot, the Mule is no longer as fast as it was. I will say the other thing as well the Mule won't do as well now is doing its sprint in order to cover objectives or to act as movable terrain. You can only do that 15 inches now. 3 inches less, but it's a change.
Yeah, I mean, usually when you're using them as mobile terrain, you're probably doing a move and a pin anyway, which is funny when you position them, backwards to face the butt at the opponent, because it doesn't matter which way it's facing. So,
I'm sure it's intended as it looks.
Yes. Yes, if you're going to drop a shooter unit to shoot, the others, there's better options than a Mule. Unless you're looking at units that cap out at the 5 anyway, in which case you probably want the budget of the Mule still.
Yep.
Particularly the pinning, the HMG or autocannon as well is quite valuable there. So something like a salvage engineer unit, you still probably want the Mule.
Mm-hmm.
Don't pay for a Wolverine.
Unless you're putting 2 in there.
Unless you're putting 2 in there, but when you look at the cost, it's not that far off 2 Mules, 1 Wolverine. Just like, a 10-man unit versus a 5-man unit in cost, as long as the drop cost on that unit is low enough, so, not ghouls, double the unit count that can, be spread out or go to do different things, you're only paying a little bit more than double the cost in points. So it does depend then what you're trying to do with it. Like, obviously, a bigger unit can't go on a Mule. If you want a bigger unit, go one of the other options. They're both great now. All great.
I love that we're able to have this conversation because before we just but it's a specialist.
So yeah, it used to just drop the number of models in the unit and put them in a Mule. Yep. Now it's not. It's what do you want to do with the unit, and then you can choose the most appropriate transport for that. Even with the NAR assault tank, Mules still do win the competition for best assault transport.
Yep.
So if you're taking a small enough assault unit, it's always a Mule. The others just aren't really an option.
It's also worth thinking of now of the enclosed Mule, because that's 915 and carries 10. That's not a terrible assault transport either.
Yeah, well, it's still a Mule, but yes. It's
a Mule by any other name?
Yep. But that becomes a great option.
Our next one is a selection of units which have all seen their points go up. So we've seen a lot of the monsters in the game, the big beasts with terrifying who claw through everything. So the cost of aberrations, both in Plague and Maison Labs, Plague Lords, Corruptions in the Night Stalkers, Dread Fiends and Terrors, and for the Veerman Mutant Rat Fiends have all had their points go up. What's our feelings on this?
The one I'm going to pick out is a Dread Fiend because I don't understand why it went up. It's got a much bigger base than all those other monsters on the same size. It is the one that does not have unflinching. So if it gets pinned, it's actually going to be slower than most of the others. It's only 5 points cheaper than Aberration, which it was anyway before. But I'd rather take an Aberration any day of the week over a Dread Fiend.
You have heavy armor on a Dread Fiend, right?
Yeah, but you can still get pinned. You don't have to be hit by a pinning weapon. You don't have to be wounded by one to be pinned. So now you're moving slower. And that's the one I just find weird. It's 5 points. I'm not going to cry too much about it, but it just seems weird. It feels like a strange change for that one.
I don't hate the change, but I also never thought that the costs of these units were that much of a problem, so I never would have thought to increase them because they just seemed fine to me. So I'm pretty meh on it.
I think the faction hit biggest by this is Plague, of course, because they've seen Aberrations, Corruptions, and Plague Lords all go up by 10 points each. So that means if you're planning on running all 3, that's an extra 30 points. And if you're planning on stacking even more, you can still do it. They are still good units. I guess I am glad that we are just looking at points increases rather than debuffs to the units, right? If you plan on stacking multiple monsters, you start to have the points increases start to rack up. All right, we're now going to start breaking down faction by faction all of the additional changes we haven't already covered. So some of them are going to be very brief because they've actually had all of their changes wrapped up in these broader ones. Some of them, which we haven't covered so much, are going to be a little longer. So we're still going to cover every single change to factions that have happened for alignment protocols. Let's start with the Asterians. So, for the Marionettes, they've had the AP of their grenade launcher increased to 1. They are now the same as all the other factions, which is good because they cost the same. Matsudan Fire Team and Matsudan Support Teams have their ion barrages changed to 3D. Also worth noting, though, that the Ozeki upgrade in the Fire Team is now listed as 10 points, and the Yokozuna upgrade is listed as 15. They were previously 0. The Chroma Force platform has the range of its super heavy plasma vortex extended to 36. Previously it was 24, and had its blast value changed from D4 to D4 plus 1, so it actually becomes a little bit more of a valid choice. The Escort has had its points reduced to 110. I don't know if we were seeing many of these in play. The Cypher Prime is having its points increased by 5, gaining Shield Generator and removing the Shield Drone, which is basically the same as making the Shield Drone part of the model that starts with Shield Generator anyway. But it means you always have to take it now. Then there have been a few changes to the Matsudan beta units, the ones we've only just started to see come through in the vault. So the Matsudan heavy assault teams have lost their shields and are now armor 7 instead, because they've actually got physical shields rather than energy ones. The Matsudan assault grav bikes, thankfully, have been reduced to melee 5 instead of melee 4, and they've had their cost increased by 5 per model, meaning the starting unit is now 100. The Osansho Predator gains a hit point going up to 4 and gains Resilient 1. It also reduces the cost of the second Osansho to 45. The Ronin now has the chance to take some Matsuyamori bloodhounds. It can have some dogs accompanying instead of the Haniwa marionettes. And the Matsudan grav bikes now have the option to exchange their ion repeater for a twin light missile launcher. If you're looking to get some anti-air into the unit, it's about the same in terms of damage output, though. What are our thoughts on the Asterian changes?
I don't know, Luke, do you think most of that sounds like there were buffs to Asterians? Which plays Asterians again?
Yeah, that's why Sam's so excited about it.
Yeah, so going there.
I'm now having to pay for my Matsudan upgrades. The Matsudan Assault grav bikes have been reduced because they were busted before.
I really like the change to the Predator. I think it's a much more usable unit now. There was no reason to take it before other than I like it.
It is a great looking model, and we said so, but you're only taking it for flavour.
Yep, I agree. I don't know if I'm going to, air quotes, like these changes to Asterians. Asterians were hardly struggling in the first place, and in the general there seems to be buffs, but God, those massive assault grab bikes sure needed to be done, and I'm glad that happened.
Yeah, and the loss of the shields on the heavy assault as well makes a lot of sense. Like I said, physical shields, not energy. It's good.
Yeah. I mean, I saw no real reason to take the Super Heavy Plasma Vortex before. It was 12 inches less range than the Super Heavy Fission Beamer. The Super Heavy Fission Beamer had a roll with a Tank Hunter, and this was just blast D4. I think it was a +1 AP missile launcher, effectively, on a vehicle that cost like 100 points. Why would you? Well, no, now you have a reason to. In terms of fun, I like the Matsuyamori with the Ronin.
You like Dags?
I mean, it's worth noting that for 6 points, you get the Matsuyamori, which basically, when they accompany him, have the exact same profile as the Haniwa marionettes, or you can pay 2 points more, in which case you get the regular Haniwa marionettes who will have a rifle, but the same stat line, or you can pay a little bit more and you'll have the Haniwa marionettes with the katana. So it's basically you choose your level of bodyguard. Just for cool, I've already got my Matsuyamori on my painting table.
That is 100% how I would run him.
I also really like the Cypher Prime change because the model is actually carrying a physical shield. He's actually carrying his shield generator in the same way the Spectre is. So I like it in terms of the rules mirroring what the model actually has. Mike, do you want to take us through the changes to enforcers? Well, I know that the rules committee, when we were interviewing, saying this was the faction which was going to be seeing the most changes.
Yeah, and certainly has had a lot of changes, and probably look at seeing how it changes and plays differently on the table, or what kind of units people start to take for them as they explore what enforcers can do now. Well, one of the big ones is the Dominator rifles, which you mainly see on the Peacekeepers and the jet bikes. Have now been added the trademark keyword. So Enforcer's already had a good selection of trademark orders, and they can now actually be applied to Dominator rifles as well. It can make some of these units look pretty scary at this point in time. Pathfinders now have a starting unit of 4 for 85 instead of 5 models. They gain stealthy, but they no longer have the cloak option to be able to give them stealthy on this. They automatically come with stealthy, which is good.
Yeah.
Enforcer operatives also have a starting unit of 4 models for 90 points. It's 21 points for each extra operative. The medic's pistol is now a laser rifle, because you had a bit of an issue before where you had different models in the unit having different ranges, which is good to be, that's fixed. Assault Enforcers also have a starting unit of 4 models for 90 points, 21 points for the extra Enforcers. The HMX-32 missile launcher has now got a split profile. It is not just anti-tank, it also has the option to at least have a blast option with 2 dice, Pt.1, blast D2. So if you don't happen to see any heavy armor on the other side of the table, you now can have something else to do with that particular weapon, which is good.
And that's both in the operatives and
The heavy support
and the jet bikes. All the HMXs now.
Yes. Breach and Eradicate Enforcers drop their points to 130 and change the thermal charge devastating value to devastating D2 plus 1. Makes them an interesting unit to have a good look at. Enforcer Defenders drop their points to 125 and 24 for extra Enforcer Defenders. Their Enforcer drone options are now free. Peacekeepers starting unit of 3. So that's an increase. They have to take a minimum of 3 models now for 130. I think we made comments of it at one point in time. It just being really weird that in an elite army, that the elite of the elite happen to be the best options to take as your base unit.
But for cheap unlocks,
For cheap unlocks. So yeah, from a flavour point of view, I'm in favour of that particular change. Enforcer drones. The Enforcer drone options are now free. And the Accuser Interceptor increases capacity to 6, so that brand new unit of 3 peacekeepers that we can take and all jump in the Accuser Interceptors and its variants that it has. The Mark IV Novishock peacekeepers drop their points to 135 and 60 points for the extra Novishocks, and increasing range for both of the guns to 24 inches.
that's great.
Yeah. It used to be an overcosted, worthless unit. And now it's a reasonably costed, not worthless unit.
High praise.
And the Dementors, Knights of platform, loses its slow reload but gains bulky.
So it can no longer go inside your accusers.
Or buildings.
Yeah.
It is a construct, it is not a vehicle, and not being bulky meant, it could sit in a building and just be weird.
Yeah, that is weird. The changes I like most with this is the drops to 4 model counts on a lot of the troop units in the list. Because we know one of the problems with Enforcers wasn't necessarily the amount of damage they're outputting. It's mostly about having enough drops on the table in order to fulfill some of the missions with lots of objectives where you need to get bodies to lots of different places and you can't split the units up. Now you can actually take a few more low model count drops in order to contest those. It also gives you the option to get a few more slots in your list than you might have had before.
Yeah, these changes are overall all really great. The demand to, losing slow reload is now a bit more usable than it was. You can park them in a back corner with 48 inches and shoot the tank that's parked in their back corner and then probably die to it. It's only got 3 hit points, but I don't know, maybe it gives you an option. The Novishock Peacekeepers needed this change. They're a fantastic model and they just weren't playable, and now they are. Unfortunately for me, they suffer from the same thing that the Enforcer Heavy supports are going to suffer from, and that is I can now take units of 4 operatives as an unlocking option with 2 missile launchers in each and get what I wanted from those units, but unlocking units now instead. And spread out over multiple units as well, so they're less susceptible to taking wounds. You lose 1 operative, and that's a guy with a rifle. You lose an Enforcer Heavy Support, that's a guy with a missile launcher, right? So that's my preferred way to play those. The trademark on Dominators is going to be a massive shake-up to this. So now where I found people were playing 1 or 2 Peacekeeper units, I think there's going to be a lot more because they've now got a lot more order options. And when you think about being able to, have Peacekeepers on the front line, particularly if there's something like Peacekeeper Defenders, turn 1 activation is to move forward, give them another 6 inches range to 24 inches, and +1 AP and marksman, I think it is, and just blat something over the enemy line is huge, as well as giving +1 AP and anti-tank to something like a unit of 6 jet bikes. There's a reasonable chance of killing a Wolverine on turn 1, first activation with that order. So I think there's going to be a lot more interesting ways to play Enforcers. They are still very elite, they're still very low unit drop, and they still have to play very hard around that fact that they have more options for being able to just say that unit goes goodbye now than they used to. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I certainly wouldn't want to face it.
I do have some concerns over mobility. I mean, yes, you've got jet bikes. The only other thing you've got is flyers.
Scout. A few, so the motorcycles have Scout, the Pathfinders.
And the Pathfinder LT and the Forward Observer.
Jet bikes?
Jet bikes all have Scout. Yeah, use those all before.
Half the army Scouts.
Yeah.
and there's unlocking Scouts in there. So you could literally do an entire Scout army in the forces.
That'd be an interesting concept.
Oh, I'm thinking now.
So, yes.
I start at the centre line.
Exactly.
You can start further than the centre line. Easy on that. So, yep. Good to see the TAD 65 get an increase. I'm not sure why the Arbiter or Accusers variants didn't get something in there to help them along. I think it would have been nice to see them get stealth. I mean, fluff-wise, I said it's in First Strike novel that they had stealth, and that would be sort of a hard go to explaining why they're not as heavily armoured as a TAD 65 and why they don't have a headstrong or correctional services.
Yeah,
but
they should.
It's just a bit weird. But anyway, as I said, there's other options to be able to get your army around the table. Forge Fathers. Okay, Steel Warriors and Storm Age Veterans drop the cost of the Magma Cannon down to 10 points. The Heavy Hailstorm Autocannon increases to AP2. That is the one that's taken on the Walkers.
And I think maybe also on your Halter half tracks as well.
Probably, yes. I'd have to check on that. I normally use the Magma Cannon on those.
Which is why I was happy to see this AP bump on it, because I think we were writing off the Heavy Hailstorm Autocannons on the Halters. Yeah,
the Quad Heavy Hailstorm Cannons range got decreased to 36. Boo! The Super Heavy Magma Cannon cost decreased to 15. Yay! Heavy Dragon Breath Flame against Blast D2.
So that's on the Brander?
That's on the Brander, yes. The Rekia increase in points up to 105 and 19 extra points for each extra model. Probably a boo, but anyway, it's nice to have kept them, but obviously I understand at this point why. Fagarum increases their points up to 100, 18 points per model. The Nar Assault Tank increased speed to 912. These poor dwarves won't know what hit them. And they're dropping points to...
They'll get whiplash.
They're all going to get whiplash.
No, they got no necks.
Artificers have a completely new profile. 50 points for a unit and 15 for the extra Artificers. They now have Assault 5, 1 HP, Resilient 2, and for the Master Artificer as well. And an extra mechanical appendage assault weapon. The Heavy Inferno Drill now has the option of 10 points to add the subterranean deployment keyword. So rats aren't the only things that know how to go underground anymore, which is great. I guess I'll just quickly go through and some of my points on here. So the Steel Warrior Storm to Magma Cannons. I think it does give an interesting option, particularly, we've got the NAR goes up as to be able to drop some Magma Cannons around and potentially hit some tanks with a bit of range. They still need a little bit of help to be able to get to the other deployment zone, but it gives them at least an option to be able to do that.
They should hitch a ride with the Inferno Drill.
Yeah. Should be able to.
Well, I mean, they don't need to be in the NAR, right? They can just be in the Draka because it can drive 12, drop and shoot. But the NAR for the Thorgrim, certainly. Yeah. Although the Thors have just gone up in points. So.
It's nice to see a bit of an increase to the autocannon. I don't know if it will change much. Sam and I discussed this a little bit earlier, and I think it's still the same thing about the reason why most people don't take Striders.
Burst Laser Striders.
The Burst Laser Striders in there. It's a similar situation there. Hellstorm Cannon, I don't like it, but whatever, it's happened, so you can't do much about it. But our version of a missile launcher per se, which is the Hellstorm autocannons, we're all sitting pretty much in the support slots rather than troops or specialists, so I think that kind of bites a little bit harder. But realistically, it wasn't what I was looking for in that slot anyway, so it's not going to impact me too much. I'm not sure about everybody else. The super heavy magma cannon, well, yes. The only thing that concerns me about this is, and I love it so much, that at this point in time, taking stone hammers with it seems to be the only option that I'm thinking about taking, which is the bit that worries me more than anything else.
It's made the super heavy magma cannon kind of the auto take in the support slot, do you think?
That's my gut feeling.
It's only 5 points cheaper, but it's interesting that that 5 points has...
Yes,
I guess it was good before, right?
Yeah, well, before it was a bit of a debate for me between taking Hellurmel and the Sternhammer, and to me, I think it's tipped the scales over to going to a Sternhammer rather than the Hellurmel. And the Hellurmel was the only walker that I used to really take, which means that unfortunately I may not be using it so much, but we'll see.
The interesting thing with the Iron Ancestor, though, is that it can ignore some anti-tank shots before it cares about being pinned.
With the shield?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless they dedicate shooting to take the shield off, which means they're not shooting something else. So it's still, it's still a good option.
Rekia, they were too good before. At that point value, can't really complain too much about that. And compared to the Steel Warriors, they have a much better action on the Rekia. Charge reaction, of course, it's got the best one, control fire.
Yeah.
The Thorgarum, I can see both ways. Personally, they were a 50-50 choice for me. I used to rotate Thorgarum and Brockers around. I personally prefer the Brockers' versatility, even though they don't have the heavy armor, but they know how to use a pistol. Thorgarum don't. Thorgarum hit harder. For me, I've always kind of liked that. It's kind of, I can get 8 Brockers for the same price of the Thorgarum, and it gives me a bit more versatility, but I can see why they went up a little bit. It's only, 10 points from memory, so it's not a major one. The Nar, however, is a very, very interesting piece.
Yeah.
At 9, 12, and dropped to 100 points. My only concern there is, again, now is it was hard to choose the specialist slots before, and now that choice has become even harder on what to be able to do there. For me, at least, anyway, because I love my drop troops and I love the bikes, and now I have to try and find space in my low drop army to try and put in the NARS as well. So that becomes a very interesting section there. I might have to have a better look at Artificers. I probably don't own them at the moment. I'll have another look at them again, so I don't really have an opinion one way or the other for those.
They are a cheap unit for 50 points.
Yeah.
Well, now they're fine instead of being bad. Mm-hmm. And fine means they're usable and they're cool. So it doesn't suck to take them. So that's good. Good.
Resilient 2 is great. Yeah. I love Resilient 2.
Take this unit. It's fine.
I think there are a lot of good nudges up and down for the Forge Fathers in terms of a little bit of AP here, a little bit less range there, some points adjustments and so on. But I think the most fun thing is that drill, and just particularly because you could probably take 2 of them and a couple of Hammer Fist drop troops, and you can have a raining from above and burrowing up from below and pretend you're Veerman. It's great.
Yeah, so a lot of the changes there, just tweaks up and down, which are all fine and great and good. The 3 that stand out to me are the rework to Artificers to make them usable.
Yep.
The Nar going down in points as well,
yeah.
Which it needed to justify its specialist slot over the Drakkar, even though it has the assault rule. It was just such a big ask to take. Now speed 9, 12 in the Stumpy Leg faction, and at 100 points.
It can drive 9, jump out and charge.
And they've got the shooting as well, which is good. Great option now. And the Heavy Inferno drill, as soon as I heard that, I was like, yes, that is fantastic. 2 of them and a couple of drop troops just makes an awesome little little group to drop in behind the enemy and wreak some havoc. It would be cool if you could give, say, the Heavy Inferno drill as a drone upgrade to Brockers to give them subterranean deployment. Something like that would be really cool.
That does sound fun.
You'd probably have to pay a fair bit for that as an option on a troop, but something like that could be cool.
We're now rolling on to GCPS. We've actually already talked about most of the GCPS changes already in the broader cross-faction talk. So there's only 3. TAC drones now start with 2 models in the unit for 95. They actually just used to start with a single model. Riot troopers have gained the best charge reaction, controlled fire, losing countercharge. in addition to the broader vehicle transport changes for the TAD-65 Hornet, they've also decreased the cost of their pintle-mounted dual carbines to 5 points. Any thoughts on those last few changes?
Can we just get rid of tack drones?
No.
Yeah. Good. Tac drones, really good. Bit of a nerf there. Totally fine. Riot troopers, they were already good and they were already taken, and I would already put them in a list anyway. So did they need this from a power perspective? No, not really. But it's just it makes them it makes sense.
Because it's shields up, shotguns ready.
Exactly. It makes sense, and it's not busted good or anything, so happy for it to be there.
I will say we did comment before during the Maison Labs review that the containment division unit distinguished itself from the GCPS riot troops. Containment unit had controlled fire and the riot troops had countercharge. Now they've been brought in line with the Maison version.
Yes.
All right, Luke, do you want to take us through the Marauders?
So we've already discussed a few of the other Marauders changes elsewhere. There's a number of units by those group sweeping changes. The two remaining ones are that more beasts gain sure-footed, which is great because
there are 4 of them.
They are dogs. And they replaced the bomb option. So it used to be a one-shot bomb that didn't add a whole lot at the expense of killing the model. So that's the weapon option. Fletchlet Blast is now 2 points, and it makes it 2 dice AP1 Blast D2. So it just adds the Blast D2 to them. Someone did comment on the Facebook group that he's sad that he's lost his exploding dogs. I agree. I think that it was a badly balanced option with the points that you paid and then the effect that you got for the exploding dog, but it was cool that they blew up. Poor dogs, I guess, but because they'd have a giant bomb strapped to their back. Yep. Right? So, I probably would have preferred to see it, blow up bigger, but then it becomes a bit of a balancing issue. So I can see why this has gone that way. You can't just run a bunch of exploding dogs into someone, blow themselves up, and take out an entire unit with them.
If the cost of performing the action is the entire unit, then always you're going to be balancing of, can I kill more with this unit than this unit costs? And if it's less, then the unit is not worth taking, and so you would never take the unit. But if it's more, you would always take that unit because you're going to kill more than the unit is worth. So it's really impossible to balance well.
Yeah, and for a unit like More Beasts, where if there's anything left alive and attacking back, they're dead anyway. So you may as well blow yourself up when you go in. Now, 2 points is a bit of a weird points value, as I've said, for Marauders. I don't think you're often going to say, I've got 2 points, I may as well give Fletchlet Blast to a More Beast, because that's just never really going to happen. It would be more like you've got 5 points and you're like, do I give 2 of them bombs? 10 or something, and you want all of them to have it, because that ends up being a 20-point bump or whatever. Then that's a fair enough option as well. The other change is the Marauder weapons teams. They increase points to 90 and reducing the cost of the Hugh cannon then to +5. So it becomes like 95 or 100 if you want to give 1 or 2 the Hugh cannon. And they gain slow reload, which is sort of probably the bigger one there, along with nerf to missile launchers.
Fine. These 2 changes realistically are pretty fine.
Yeah, like we've discussed before, they're no longer wheelbarrows, bro. They are back to being a sort of a tripod on wheels. So the slow reload does make a bit of sense for that unit. And then the gun track, which was the poor stepchild of the weapons team, has lost the slow reload. So it's a nice reason to maybe take the gun tracks instead.
I mean, I know we were talking during the Marauder faction review that the Marauder weapons teams kind of crowded out a lot of the specialist options just because of the amount of power they can output.
Yeah.
Now with the loss of slow reload, the overall nerfs to missile launchers that they dropped to AP1 and Seismic, the further nerfs to the Marauder weapon team missile launchers that they now just have the same missile launchers as everyone else. They still have a place, though, for you?
With the way I play Marauders, probably, yeah. But a lot of Marauder players won't probably play them anymore.
Do you think there's value in the Hugh cannon upgrade now that it's only 5 points?
I think if I've got the unlock for gun tracks, no. I would take the gun tracks.
Interesting. All right, let's roll on to Maison Labs. So again, we've covered most of the changes already, so here are the last few that pertain to Maison Labs. Blackwing Marines get to decrease their points cost to 55 for the unit and 8 points for each extra Marine. The Blackwing TAC drones, the heavy laser rifle, changes to come in line with the GCPS heavy laser rifle. It's now 3D AP2. They've also lost the sonic defense drone option that didn't have a model and no one ever took. And also the cost of the command drone has been reduced to 0 points as well. That's the one which loses its gun but gives a black die. I guess the thought is that it's already paid enough for that upgrade as well. And the Neuralink Chovar has lost its cognitive disruption special keyword from Mind Scramble and instead has just gained pinning. Any thoughts on those changes?
Well, yeah, I mean, just give it pinning and get rid of the weird rule.
It didn't add much because most units which had good armor also had good nerve.
Yes, and that's exactly right. That was always the problem. You're like, well, it may as well be another gun. Why am I even taking this? I don't think the Marines needed to decrease in points at all. I think they were totally fine. There was no reason to do that. People took them.
As a Maison player, you took them because you need to have something which can stand on a point and output damage, and there's nothing else in the list which can really do it. But they were an expensive unit before for a shoot 5, armor 5, 1 hit point. They were basically Marines with headstrong. It ended up being a little bit expensive. I'm very happy to take the points reduction, and I'm gonna.
Yeah.
So.
Night Stalkers. Okay, so we had the change for the horror. The horror is now got a tactician value of 2 black dice rather than an orange dice. And the Butcher Flesh Ripper has changed his tactician value to an orange dice from 2 black dice. Bit of a shuffle. It's basically a minute buff to the horror and a minute nerf to the Flesh Ripper, but there's really not a whole lot in that. Shadowhounds decreasing points to 50 points and gain the auxiliary keyword. The dread size on the Scarecrows have now dropped to 2 points.
Yeah, good.
Needle Fangs decreased the maximum squad value to 4 and add the Scout keyword. Look, it makes a very interesting unit, but I don't get the squad size of 4 because they come 3 in a box, which is a bit strange, but anyhow.
I imagine it's so because they have Scout and they're an assault unit, which means there could be a turn 1 charge. By limiting the max squad size, you limit the amount that that could abuse. Yeah, so that it can be abused.
Must be really excited to buy 2 boxes of them just to be able to get them to squad 4 and have 2.
You'll probably only just run them as 3, but it means that someone can't run them in huge squads and kill a unit first activation.
Well, I guess you could take 3 units of them and have 4 boxes of monster.
But there are specialists who are using unlocks to do that now.
It's possible, isn't it? The Mind Screech, no, I'm not happy. And they now have the asterisks, the dreaded asterisks on their Psychic Maelstrom and Astral Lance, which means that they need to choose between those 2 weapon options when they use them. And their points did not change with that option either, however. But the Planar Apparition did get cheaper by 10 points. So that does give it a little bit better of an option to be able to take in that area there.
Yeah, I mean, particularly it's not just dropped in the 10 points of its actual cost, it's dropped in the opportunity cost. Before you had to give up the Astral Lance, and you still do, to give up the Astral Lance to take the Planar Apparition. But now you don't mind that so much because you can only fire 1 gun anyway. So hopefully we'll see the Planar Apparition taken a little more.
It would have been nice, I think, if the balance to the asterisks on the shots was to give them targeting systems. So if you have multiple in a unit, because they're very expensive. So if you have multiple in a unit, then being able to split shots, 1 at a tank, 1 at a unit, would have been still not as busted good as, would have been with targeting systems when they could shoot both, but could have been a good balancing thing from that, but alas.
It also means you could snipe 2 tanks at once, or pin 2 units at once.
Yeah, swings and roundabouts.
Yeah.
So the Shadowhounds going to auxiliary is probably really good because, yes, you could spam them and do a lot of shenanigans with a very cheap unlock.
It makes them like the Matsuya Mori in the Asterians or the Rat Swarms in Veerman. It's that here's our throwaway unit that we don't care about.
Yeah, like they needed to be decreased in points, but then the concern would have been obviously spamming them at 50 points would have been ridiculous. So that's good.
Yeah. All right, well, now we get to run on to Plague. There is only 1 change left that we haven't talked about in Plague. All their other debuffs occurred to their monsters earlier. The last one is a buff, which is that the Stage 2B bursters gain Toxic on Pus Burst and Claws. I'm very happy about this. If there's ever a unit which looks toxic, it's those Plague Bursters.
Yeah, I've dunked on this unit before. This is this, as well as the indirect buff from transports, make this quite a viable unit now.
Like I said, I'm very excited to put bursters in a Hornet, which is not at all a sentence I would have said a couple of months ago.
I don't think the Hornet wants the bursters in the Hornet.
Well, at least if the bursters were in the Hornet, it'd give them a valuable reason for their order then to hit all the flyers. But anyway.
Point. That's all for Plague. Luke, do you want to take us through the Veermen?
Yes, our last and final faction. So there's a number of changes happening to the Veermen. So we've got Maligny decreasing the Chem Thrower upgrade to 2 points per model, which is interesting, I guess, compared to the Flamer changes everywhere else. But 2 points, which, I mean, fine, but no one's taking Maligny with Flamers anyway, so...
Maybe they will now.
No. Then Claw Shots get Small Unit 3, so it makes a slight buff to a unit that you would never take. Heavy Chem Thrower range reduced to 12 inches on both the Night Terrors and the Nightmares, and for the Nightmares they go down to 10 points instead of 15, which would have been pretty terrible at the 12 inches range.
Yeah.
This, while I cry a bit in Night Terror, completely reasonable change. They did always feel a bit off. All the Tunnelers now have the same assault weapon, which is the Rock Crusher drills at assault 4 dice, AP 4, and anti-tank. Neither here nor there really, but nice to get them even.
Can I say that's 2D less than an Aberration? The Aberration are 60 AP4 anti-tank. So when you say, that's 2/3 of an Aberration hitting you.
Yeah, you're also paying for the gun. It's great when you get assaulted, more so than for the assaulting.
It surprises people that they're eating drill.
Yeah, and I've had that before, actually, with someone charging a Drakkar or something into my Tunneler, and they're like, wait, how do they hit back? I think that was the Tangle Tunneler. I'm like, yeah, this thing slaps.
It's nice to have it standard across the board. If you've got a Tunneler, you have drills up the front, and they do this.
Yes. The Tunneler and Saturation Tunneler reduced the super heavy ray gun cost to 20 instead of, I think it was 25, and the heavy Chem Thrower to 10 points. The Saturation Tunneler also gains targeting systems, which is great. Like it needed something like that for those missiles to go off there while the other weapon goes and does something else. So that's cool. Gives you a reason to take those now, especially considering the next nerf, which is Defensive Shielding, increases its cost to 15 points. Now, that's actually, if you're taking the super heavy ray gun and the shields, same comes out
it's
of the
a wash.
points.
Yeah.
So it just makes it a bit more interesting to take other options. However, it also is minus 10 transport capacity instead of 5, so no more putting 2 Nightmares in your Tunneler. And it no longer protects other vehicles, which is one of the biggest nerfs, I think, in the entire update for Veermen. Death Engines, sadly, not specialists like I've been campaigning for, still sitting in support, so no one will probably take them. They do reduce to 60 points, which, in light of the Mutant Rat Fiend, maybe, in points increase, maybe they become a little bit more worthwhile, but they also decrease in hit points to 4. So just take a Mutant Rat Fiend, don't worry about it. Melee Death Engines are a worse Mutant Rat Fiend, and ranged ones are worse Rumblers, so don't bother. Broodmother gains Elite, fine. She should have had it because it makes sense based on the Brew Guard or whatever, but whatever. It's a very minor buff. And the Tangle and Tangle Tunneler both get the asterisks on the psychic weapons, and the Tangle Tunneler also reduces to 1 times orange die instead of the 2. I'll let you guys have your thoughts on this before I to mine.
Before you unleash your heavy Chem Thrower.
Yeah.
I think someone's been touched by psychic a bit too often. Judging that we lost both our psychic weapons, or at least got the dreaded asterisks next to them.
I do like the Elite on the Broodmother. I know there's a lot of changes in here, but I do like the Elite on the Broodmother because it helps fix a niggling problem. She didn't have Elite. Broodguard do, but on their profile, not on their weapons, which means as soon as they're added to her retinue, they immediately lose their Elite. So now she has Elite, which means the whole unit gets it. It means if any Maligni join her, they gain Elite, and I guess why wouldn't they? They're probably the Elite Maligni. So I like that as a little change.
Don't really have much to add there. I do like the fact that I always thought the drills should be better in combat. You pop out of the ground and they should be able to chew rocks, you should be able to tanks just as easily and be able to go in there and do that. So I like that change. I also like the change that the big super heavy flamethrowers on the Terrors has been reduced because they were a terror. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with VMN over the next 12 months.
Like you said, if they can eat rocks, they should be able to eat tanks. I would have actually preferred to see something like AP3's anti-tank seismic.
Anti-tank and seismic.
Or maybe even just not anti-tank but seismic instead or something like that. Like I think seismic for me, like rock crushing.
It is literally seismic.
Exactly. So I like finding a way to get that in there just for the flavour, whether it ends coming out in the wash or not, whatever. But I think I originally thought, something like AP4 seismic or whatever, which actually makes it AP5 against tanks.
Yeah.
And a little bit better against heavy armour, but a lot, a bit worse against infantry and stuff. Maybe that would have been cool. That aside, there's a bunch of very minor buffs in here that is not enough for anyone to write home about. The Horde, yes, we spoke about before. I think that's good, but it's not going to fundamentally change the way the list plays, and it's not going to change what you choose in a list. It's just a nice to have on those units for when it matters. You're not going, I'm not going to take Nightmares now because I've got Overwhelm on Stalkers. No, that's never happening, right? So it doesn't change list composition, and it doesn't ultimately affect the outcome of battles materially to a degree that is worth, making any other concessions about. So it's nice, but it's it is what it is. Then there's a bunch of, like I said, buffs that are very quite minor. The only one I wouldn't call minor is the Saturation Tunneler. I think that got a bit of a glow.
Yeah.
So that's great for it. I don't know that I would take one still, but some people like them, and it's great because it becomes a much more viable option for them.
That was going to be my next question, because I was going to say, with the points increases to shield tunnelers, the fact they don't shield vehicles and that they lose all capacity, just like the saturation one does, would you now consider a saturation over a shield tunneler?
Well, maybe I've got to go back to the drawing board and have a look at VMN, because this update has basically effectively nullified how I run the army.
Because you run twin shield tunnelers and a tangle tunneler.
Yes.
And they've all been hit.
Yeah, they've all been hit. As well as the Night Terrors and Nightmares, and the capacity for my Nightmares, and there's basically everything that I run has been nerfed.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and quite significantly. So to look at the Tangle Tunneler, like it's a 150 point unit. It is insanely expensive. It's been directly nerfed because now you can only shoot one. The psychic weapons should have been, you choose this or that. That is the nerf that I think should have happened. It's also been indirectly nerfed by the change of the shield tunnelers, because now it can't be shielded. So it is going to get targeted, and is a very expensive unit that's now significantly less effective. It gives you 1 orange die now instead of 2, along with an order that you almost never use. So it's got a bad order. It's very expensive. It's not even a great anti-tank tank with the only AP3 and whatnot. So yes, it can shoot through a wall to do that. That's the only reason to still consider it, but I don't think that I'll be running it, which makes me glad that I made the tangle part a magnetic attachment. That's the tangle tunneler, the defensive shielding, coming out in a wash with the points, fine, but not being able to shield vehicles, makes things like death engines indirectly even worse, because it can shield a mutant rat fiend, and rumblers are still worse, because, and in fact, that's probably even more reason not to take a rumbler, ironically, now, because I have had to shield the rumblers with the shield tunneler before, because they don't have many hit points. Again, just indirect nerfs to other units just because the shield tunneler can't shield them anymore. Indirect nerf to saturation tunneler. If you wanted to run a shield tunneler next to a saturation tunneler, now the saturation tunneler can't share the shield. So that one hurts a lot, as well as the -10 capacity. So these are all nerfs that I think in isolation seem reasonable. It's when you look at the totality of them and then what you're paying for that unit, they just become a pretty unenticing option for me now.
I guess there is still utility in the shield tunneler for being run alongside infantry, shielding things like Brood Mothers, Night Terrors, Brood Guard, Nightmares. Obviously, it can't be there for shielding vehicles, but it can still shield valuable units. But I appreciate it's fundamentally changed the way you're playing your Veerman.
Basically, all of the great options were nerfed. It's a faction that is not above curve as a faction. It is probably below curve as a faction when you talk about inter-faction balance. All of the stuff that was good in the faction has been nerfed now, with no commensurate buffs to bring the faction up. So now you might have had internal balance in the list a bit better, because now you're considering a lot more of the options. I think the the inter-faction balance is off now, and they are a significantly weaker faction overall because of it.
We'll have to see. And that brings us to the end of all of the factions. So we've had the chance to run through all of the rules changes and all of the changes to the factions except for their orders and anything related to designation keywords. So next episode, we'll be unpacking all of those changes, and there have been some surprising changes on some of the orders, some subtle changes. We look forward to unpacking them with you in our next episode. As we close out, let's do Overwatch. What's on our horizon?
As usual, I guess, we've got a couple of tournaments coming up in the next couple of months that I'm getting ready for. There's one in August that I'm running for the local crew. That and probably deciding what I want to now paint in my out of alignment protocols in my various units. So I have a Dementor, I have Nova Shocks, and I still have a few things like Void Rays and more Reapers in boxes that I have to unpack and still be able to paint and have a play around with some of the Forge Father options.
Lovely.
Yeah, likewise, adding to my Enforcers now and a few different options there. Looking forward to getting them back on the table. I've run them a couple of times in command protocols, but I'm excited that they're usable now, I think. We'll see how that goes. I'm looking forward to the PDF of these changes coming out. We've been told there will be a PDF for alignment protocols, and I'm looking forward to having that document, being able to read through it all in one go. And I'm looking forward to Epic Warpath, not because I plan on playing Epic Warpath, but I'm looking forward to buying some of those models and some potential proxies for things just to add some variety and stuff into my armies. Looks fun.
Excellent. I'm also looking forward to Epic Warpath. We heard that it's actually going to be starting shipping over the next few weeks, so I'll be keeping my eye on the post. Like you guys, I am also furiously list building with all of the changes for alignment protocols, thinking of the next tournament, but also just, I've never played this unit or I've only played it a couple of times. I now have a reason to put it in. Let's see how it plays. So I'm looking forward to the new meta that alignment protocols might bring us. That brings us to the close of our episode. Do join us next time as we unpack part 2 of alignment protocols. And until then, steady your aim, load up those flying transports, and unleash controlled fire.
Hear the